Dr. Han Su wiped sweat from his brow as he studied the readings on his tablet. The red dust of Mars swirled around his feet. Something was wrong with these numbers. The seismic activity in Mire Valley did not match any known geological patterns. Dr. Han, you need to see this, called Li Min, his young assistant. She stood by a large rock formation, her eyes wide with wonder. Han walked over, his heavy boots crunching on the Martian soil. The Mars colony had been established 20 years ago, in 2137, but the planet still held many secrets. "What did you find?" he asked. Li Min pointed at what looked like carvings on the rock face. They were not random. They formed patterns too perfect to be natural. "These are not from wind or water," Han said quietly. He ran his gloved fingers over the marks. These were made by tools. The team gathered around the discovery. Park Jin, the team's photographer, took pictures while Ba Yu, their data analyst, scanned the markings. "Dr. Han," Ba said, his voice shaking, "these markings match no known human language or symbol system." Han nodded slowly. "Because they're not human." The team fell silent. The wind howled through the valley, carrying red dust that had been undisturbed for thousands of years. "We need to report this to Earth Command," Han finally said. 3 days later, the discovery was made public. Scientists around the solar system debated what the markings meant. Some said they were natural formations. Others claimed they were evidence of ancient Martians. A few even suggested it was a hoax. But Han knew what he had found, and he was proven right when the sky above Mars lit up with strange lights 1 week after their discovery. The first alien ship entered Mars orbit on a Tuesday. It was massive, nearly a kilometer long and shaped like a smooth, polished stone. Earth Command sent urgent messages to all colonies. "Stay calm. Do not engage. Wait for instructions." Han and his team were ordered to return to the main Mars colony at Olympus Base. They watched from the colony's observation dome as 3 smaller ships broke off from the main vessel and descended toward the planet. "They're heading for Mire Valley," Li Min whispered. "They're going to our dig site." Han nodded. "They know we found their markings." 2 days later, the aliens made official contact. They called themselves the Galactic Confederation, a union of 17 spacefaring species. They had been watching Earth for centuries, waiting for humans to develop enough to be worth talking to. The aliens looked nothing like humans expected. The representatives who arrived at Olympus Base were tall, with dry, scale-like skin in shades of gold and bronze. They had 4 arms and moved with elegant grace despite Mars' lower gravity. "We are pleased to make formal contact with your species," their leader said through a translation device. "We have observed your development for some time." The human delegation, which included Dr. Han, listened in awe as the aliens explained their history. The Confederation had existed for over 50,000 years. They had visited Mars long ago, leaving behind markers to be found when humans were ready. Then came the words that would change humanity's place in the universe forever. "You are what we classify as a mud species," the alien said, its voice free of emotion. "Beings who evolved on wet, dirty worlds with high bacterial content. Most advanced species in our confederation evolved in cleaner environments, deserts, ice worlds, or in space itself." Han noticed how the aliens seemed to stand as far from the humans as possible. Its nostrils, if that's what they were, occasionally contracted, as if smelling something unpleasant. Nevertheless, the alien continued, "Mud species often develop unique traits, adaptability, resilience. These can be valuable." Han looked at his fellow humans. They were being insulted and complimented at the same time. "We have come to offer Earth and its colonies membership in the Galactic Confederation," the alien said. "As a probationary species, of course." And just like that, humanity learned its place in the stars. They were the newcomers, the primitives, the mud people. But Han Su smiled slightly as he watched the aliens flinch when a human approached too closely. Sometimes, Being underestimated was an advantage. Kim Jae stood before the mirror in his small room at the United Earth Embassy on Mars. He straightened his blue uniform and took a deep breath. Today was important. Today, humanity would either take its place among the stars or be left behind. 3 months had passed since the aliens, the Galactic Confederation, had made contact. Earth governments had argued, fought, and finally agreed to send one person to speak for all humans. They had chosen Kim Ja, a diplomat known for staying calm in difficult situations. "Just don't make them angry," his boss had told him before he left Earth. "We know almost nothing about them." Kim walked down the long hallway to the meeting room. 2 human guards stood at the door. They nodded as he passed. Inside, the room was set up with 2 tables facing each other. The human table was normal height. The alien table was taller, with strange seats that looked more like stands than chairs. Ambassador Tekel, the Confederation representative, entered with 2 assistants. All 3 aliens stood nearly 7 feet tall. Their golden scales caught the light as they moved. Tekel had 6 fingers on each of his 4 hands. His eyes were large and black, with no visible pupils. "Diplomat Kim," Tekel said through his translation device, "we trust your accommodations are adequate." Kim nodded. "Yes, thank you. We appreciate your hospitality." The aliens took their positions at the tall table. Kim noticed they had brought their own air filters, small devices that hummed quietly on their chests. "Your species' smell is strong," Tekel said, noticing Kim's gaze. "We mean no offense." "None taken," Kim replied, though he felt his face grow warm. Tekel placed a thin metal tablet on the table. It projected a hologram of the galaxy between them. "The Confederation spans 3 spiral arms," Tekel explained. 17 species, over 400 worlds, and thousands of space stations. Kim watched as tiny lights appeared across the hologram, showing Confederation territory. Earth and its few colonies were just a small dot at the edge. "What do you want from us?" Kim asked directly. His superiors had told him to be respectful, but he knew humans needed answers. Tekel's head tilted. "Interesting. Most species ask what they will gain, not what they must give." The alien pressed the tablet, and the hologram changed to show different colored dots. "The galaxy is divided by evolutionary type," Tekel continued. "Blue for vacuum species, born in space. Yellow for desert species evolved in dry environments. Green for ice species." He paused. "And brown for mud species, like yours." Kim noticed there were very few brown dots. "Are there not many mud species in the Confederation?" "Only 2 others," Tekel admitted. "Your kind tends to remain isolated. Your biological functions are difficult for others to accommodate." Kim understood then. Humans were dirty in the aliens' eyes. Wet, bacterial, leaking fluids and gases. He remembered how the aliens flinched when humans got too close. But Tekel continued, "Mud species have qualities we find valuable. You adapt quickly. You think in unusual ways. You survive conditions that would kill most Confederation species." A hologram changed again, showing a document written in both alien symbols and human language. "This is our offer. Probationary status. You will be allowed 1 colony outside your solar system. You will follow Confederation laws. After 50 years, we will review your status." Kim read through the terms carefully. Much of it seemed reasonable, but some parts concerned him. "It says here, we cannot modify any planet's environment without permission," Kim noted. "How do we establish a colony without changing the environment?" Tekel's head tilted the other way. "You will be assigned a world already suitable for your type." "A mud world," Kim said flatly. "Yes," Tekel replied. "You would not survive on a desert world, just as I would become ill on a wet world like Earth." Kim thought for a moment. This was not perfect, but it was a start. Humans would have access to Confederation technology, knowledge, and protection. "I will present this to Earth's governments," Kim said finally. "But I have one request." "Speak," Tekel said. "I want to visit the other mud species, to see how they live within the Confederation." Tekel was silent for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he made a sound like dry leaves rustling. An alien laugh. "Curious indeed. This is why mud species can be valuable." "Yes, Diplomat Kim. I will arrange it." As Kim left the meeting, he felt both hope and worry. Humans had a chance among the stars, but they would always be seen as the dirty ones, the primitive ones, the mud people. But perhaps mud had strengths stone did not know. Engineer Park Ta stood on the bridge of the colony ship Hope and watched as the blue-green planet grew larger in the view screen. Proxima Centauri, the first human colony outside Earth's solar system. "It's beautiful," said Li Yun, the mission's chief biologist. She stood beside Park, her eyes wide with wonder. "And wet," Park added with a small smile. "Very muddy, according to the Confederation data." After 2 years of preparation and 6 months of travel, the first human colony ship had arrived. 150 people, scientists, engineers, farmers, and their families, all chosen for their skills and adaptability. "Attention all colonists," came Captain Yun's voice over the speakers. "Prepare for landing sequence. Secure all loose items and report to your assigned seats." The landing was rough. Proxima Centauri had stronger gravity than Earth -1.3 times stronger, and a thick atmosphere that made the ship shake as it descended. Park held tight to his seat straps and closed his eyes. He had designed parts of this ship, but even he felt nervous as it groaned around them. When they finally touched down, a cheer went up from the colonists. They had made it. "Welcome to New Mud," someone joked over the comm system, and everyone laughed. But when they stepped outside, wearing their protective suits until the air could be fully tested, no one was laughing. The sky was dark with heavy clouds. Rain poured down in sheets. The ground was not just wet. It was a vast field of mud and shallow puddles stretching to the horizon. "Now I understand why the Confederation gave us this planet," Li Yun said as she collected her first soil samples. "It's perfect for us, but most of their species would hate it here." Park nodded as he supervised the deployment of the habitat modules. Each one sank slightly into the mud before its stabilizers activated. "Their loss is our gain," he said. "This soil is rich with minerals. And look at those plants." In the distance, they could see what looked like trees, but much larger than Earth trees. They had wide, flat trunks and huge leaves that caught the constant rainfall. 3 days into the colony establishment, Ambassador Tekel arrived with his observation team. The aliens stayed in their ship, using drones to monitor the human progress. They communicated through video screens, unwilling to expose themselves to the planet's wet environment. "Your people seem to be adapting well," Tekel noted, watching as humans worked in the rain, setting up equipment and exploring the area. "Most species would find these conditions unbearable." "We come from a wet world," Park explained as he reported to the ambassador. "This feels almost like home, just with stronger gravity." "Yes, your physical strength is also notable," Tekel said. "A product of your high-gravity mud world, I suppose." On the 5th day, disaster struck. A storm system appeared on the horizon, much larger than anything predicted by their weather models. The wind rose to hurricane force. Rain fell so hard it was difficult to see more than a few meters. "All colonists to the shelter modules." Captain Yun ordered over the emergency system. "Secure all equipment." Park and his engineering team raced to reinforce the habitat modules, working in the howling wind and stinging rain. From the safety of their ship, the Confederation observers watched. "You should evacuate," Tekel advised through the comlink. "Our data indicates this storm will last at least 3 days. Your structures may not survive." Park looked at Captain Yun, who shook her head. "We're staying," Park told the ambassador. "Our equipment is designed for extreme conditions." What he didn't say was that they had nowhere else to go. This was their home now. For 3 days and nights, the storm raged. The colonists huddled in the reinforced central module, listening to the wind tear at their new home. Some modules were damaged, but the central structure held. When the storm finally passed, the humans emerged to survey the damage. Several outer buildings had been destroyed. Equipment was scattered across the muddy ground. But as they worked together to rebuild, Park noticed something. The Confederation observers had emerged from their ship for the first time, watching the humans with what seemed like surprise, perhaps even respect. "Your species is more resilient than we anticipated," Takel admitted later that day. "Perhaps there is something to be said for evolution in challenging environments." Park looked around at his fellow colonists, muddy, tired, but already rebuilding. "Mud makes things grow," he said simply. "Including us." Choi Min checked his equipment one more time. As leader of the exploration team, he needed to be careful. 3 months had passed since the colony was established, and they were finally ready to explore beyond the immediate area. "Team ready?" he asked, looking at the 5 people with him. They all nodded. They wore light protective suits and carried scanning equipment, sample containers, and emergency supplies. The constant rain had eased for the first time in weeks, giving them a chance to explore further. "Remember the plan," Choi said. "We stay together. We map everything. We take samples but touch nothing unless I say so." They moved away from the colony, which now had 20 habitat modules and several farm domes. The muddy ground made walking difficult, but they had adapted. Humans were good at adapting. After 2 hours, they'd reached the base of a large hill, the first significant elevation they had seen on this flat, wet world. "Look at this," said Jinhua, the team's geologist. She pointed to an opening in the hillside. "It's a cave entrance." Choi approached carefully. The opening was about 2 meters tall and 3 meters wide. Cool air flowed out from the darkness. "Scan for life signs," he ordered. One of the team used a handheld scanner, sweeping it across the entrance. "Nothing large," the technician reported. "But there are some small energy readings deeper inside. Could be mineral deposits." Choi made his decision. "We'll go in, but not far. Just enough to map the entrance chamber." They turned on their lights and entered the cave. Inside, the ground was surprisingly dry. The walls were smooth, as if worn by water over thousands of years. As they moved deeper, Jinhua stopped suddenly. "Choi," she said quietly, "look at this." She pointed her light at the wall. There were markings there, lines and curves that formed distinct patterns. "Could be natural formations," Choi said, but he didn't believe it. The patterns were too regular. "No," Jinhua shook her head. "These are tool marks. Something, or someone, made these." They continued deeper, finding more markings. Some looked like simple pictures, circles with lines radiating outward, wavy patterns that might represent water. Then they heard it, a soft clicking sound from deeper in the cave. "Everyone stop," Choi whispered. "Turn off your lights." In the darkness, they waited. The clicking grew louder. Then Choi saw movement, a faint glow coming toward them. He slowly turned his light back on, keeping it dim. 20 meters away stood a creature unlike anything humans had seen before. It was about 1 meter tall, with a round body covered in short, pale fur. It had 4 thin limbs and a small head with no visible eyes. Most surprisingly, parts of its body glowed with a soft blue light. The creature froze when it saw them. It made more clicking sounds, faster now. "It's scared," whispered Song-na, the team's biologist. "We should back away slowly." As they retreated, more of the creatures appeared. They stayed at a distance, clicking to each other. One bolder creature moved forward, stopping to examine a scanner that a team member had dropped in surprise. "They're intelligent," Song said. "Look how it's examining our technology." Back at the colony, Choi reported their discovery to Captain Yoon and the leadership team. The news spread quickly. They were not alone on this planet. Ambassador Takel and his Confederation observers were less excited. "Cave-dwelling primitives," Takel said dismissively when shown the video footage. Barely sentient, from what we can see, common on worlds like this. They made tools, Choi argued. They created those markings in the cave. They communicate with each other. Takel waved one of his four hands. According to Confederation protocol, such species are to be left alone. They will either evolve or die out naturally. Non-interference is required. After the ambassador left, Captain Yoon looked troubled. "What are you thinking?" Choi asked her. "I'm thinking about how the Confederation sees us," she replied. "As primitives, mud people, not so different from how they see these cave creatures." Scientist Kang Do, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Then perhaps we should do what the Confederation would not do for us," he said. "Study them. Learn from them. Protect them." Choi nodded slowly. "We'll need to be careful. We don't want to harm them or their culture. We'll need to communicate with them somehow," Kang added. "I might be able to create a system based on their clicking language." Captain Yoon made her decision. "Do it, but keep it quiet. The Confederation doesn't need to know everything we do." As the meeting ended, Choi thought about the cave creatures, the Umbra, as Song Ne had named them, for their life in darkness. Humans knew what it meant to be judged as primitive. Perhaps that understanding would help them do better than the Confederation had done. Yoon Bin stood in the colony's control center, staring at the emergency alert flashing on the main screen. As colony governor, she had faced many challenges in the 6 months since they landed on Proxima Centauri, but nothing like this. "How long do we have?" she asked Kim Soo, the colony's chief scientist. 3 days until it hits us," Kim replied. "Maybe 4. It's a massive solar storm, one of the biggest I've ever seen." Proxima Centauri was a red dwarf star, smaller than Earth's sun but more active. It often released bursts of radiation and charged particles. But this storm was different. It was aimed directly at their planet, and it was powerful enough to kill any living thing exposed to it. "We need to evacuate," said Ambassador Takel, who had joined the emergency meeting via video link from his ship in orbit. "The Confederation will send transport vessels immediately." "How many people can they carry?" Yoon asked. "All colonists," Takel replied. "The evacuation can be completed in 48 hours. Yoon nodded, relieved. Then she remembered. What about the Umbra? The cave dwellers? There was silence. On the screen, Takel's alien face showed no expression that humans could read. "The Confederation vessels are for colonists only," he said finally. "The indigenous species are not our concern." In the 2 months since discovering the Umbra, the humans had made progress in communication. Kang Du's translation system could now interpret basic concepts from the Umbra's clicking language. They had learned that about 2,000 Umbra lived in the cave system. They were peaceful beings who farmed special fungi that grew in the caves and used tools made from cave minerals. They had no concept of space or other worlds. To them, the cave was the universe. "We can't just leave them to die," said Choi Min, who had grown close to the Umbra through his regular visits. "The radiation will penetrate even the cave system," Kim Soo explained. "Not immediately, but within days of the storm hitting." "Then we take them with us," Choi insisted. Ambassador Takel's voice was cold. "Confederation policy forbids relocation of indigenous species. It causes cultural destruction. They would not survive off-world. So we just let them die." Choi's voice rose. "It is the natural order," Takel replied. "Many species have become extinct due to such events. Those that survive grow stronger." After the meeting, Yoon gathered her leadership team. They met in private, away from the Confederation observers. "We have a decision to make," she said simply. "Do we evacuate and save ourselves, or do we stay and try to save the Umbra?" Park Ta, the colony's engineer, spoke first. "The caves go deep, much deeper than the Umbra have settled. If we could move them deeper and seal the tunnels, they might survive. We would need to stay behind to help them," Lee Yun pointed out. There's no way they could do it themselves in time. If we stay, we die, Ba Yu said bluntly. The room fell silent. Yoon looked at each face around the table. These were not just her colleagues. They were her friends, people she had crossed the stars with. I won't order anyone to stay, she said finally. Those who want to evacuate should do so. But I'm staying. To her surprise, no one moved to leave. One by one, they nodded their agreement. The Confederation and Earth Command will both be angry, Kim Soo warned. Yoon smiled slightly. Then we'd better succeed. They worked frantically for the next 2 days. Half the colony prepared for evacuation, gathering essential supplies and equipment. The other half worked with the Umbra, using Kang's translation system to explain the danger and guide them deeper into the cave system. At first, the Umbra were afraid. They had never ventured into the deepest caves, believing them to be forbidden places. But as Choi and the other humans showed them the path, carrying Umbra children who couldn't move fast enough, they began to understand. When the Confederation evacuation ships arrived, Yoon met Ambassador Takel at the landing site. Many colonists are missing, Takel noted, looking at the small group prepared to leave. Where are the others? They're helping the Umbra move to safer caves, Yoon said honestly. This violates direct orders from both Earth Command and the Confederation, Takel said. Those who stay will likely die. Yoon stood straight, looking up at the tall alien. We know the risks. We've made our choice. As most of the colonists boarded the evacuation ships, Yoon and 70 volunteers returned to the caves. They had less than 24 hours before the storm hit. Sometimes, Yoon thought, you had to get your hands dirty to do what was right. And humans had never been afraid of mud. The world above was deadly. For 3 days, the solar storm had raged, bathing the planet in radiation that would kill any living thing on the surface. Inside the deep caves, 70 humans and nearly 2,000 Umbra huddled in darkness. Park Ta wiped sweat from his face as he finished connecting the last power cell. He had been working for 18 hours straight, trying to build a system that would keep them all alive. Is it ready? Asked Yoon Bin. The colony governor looked tired. She had not slept since they sealed the cave entrance. Almost, Park replied. If this works, we'll have power for lights, air filters, and water purification. They had gone deeper into the caves than even the Umbra had ever ventured. Here, the air was thin and stale. Without technology, humans could not survive long. Park activated the system. Lights flickered to life, illuminating the vast underground chamber. The Umbra, with their light-sensitive skin, moved back from the brightness. Their soft clicking sounds echoed against the stone walls. Tell them it's safe now, Yoon said to Kang Do, who had brought his translation system. Kang spoke into the device, which converted his words into clicks and whistles. The Umbra leader, whom the humans called Flicker because of the pattern of lights on his body, clicked back rapidly. He says they are grateful, Kang translated, but they are afraid. They have never been this deep before. The old stories say monsters live here. Yoon looked around at the dark corners of the cave. Tell them the only monster is above us now, in the sky. But it will pass. As days turned into weeks, the humans and Umbra learned to live together in the deep caves. The humans set up a small farming area, using special lights to grow food. The Umbra showed them which cave fungi were safe to eat when supplies ran low. Park Ta worked constantly on improving their living conditions. One day, while exploring a small side tunnel, he discovered something that changed everything. It's hot, he told Yoon, leading her to the tunnel. Feel the walls. Yoon placed her hand on the stone. It was warm, almost hot to the touch. There must be geothermal activity nearby, Park explained. If we can reach it, we could have unlimited power. With the help of the Umbra, who could sense heat variations through their skin, Park's team dug deeper. After 3 days of careful work, they broke through to a chamber filled with steaming pools. Careful, Park warned as they entered. The gases could be toxic, but tests showed the air was safe. The water in the pools was hot but not boiling, heated by the planet's core. Park worked day and night, building a simple geothermal generator. When he finally activated it, power flooded through their makeshift colony. "We can expand now," he told Yoon. "Set up proper living quarters, better food production, even communication systems." The Umbra were fascinated by the human technology. At first, they just watched. But soon, some of the younger ones began to help, learning how to use simple tools, understanding basic concepts. "They're learning faster than I expected," Kang said as he watched an Umbra child correctly sort different materials for recycling. "Their brains are different from ours, but they're highly adaptable." 3 months after the solar storm had forced them underground, something remarkable happened. An Umbra approached Park Ta with a crude drawing scratched onto a flat stone. It showed a system of tunnels connecting different cave chambers. "They want to help us build," Park realized. "They're offering to show us tunnels we haven't found yet." As humans and Umbra worked together, their underground home grew. They created living spaces, farms for both human crops and Umbra fungi, and a central meeting area where both species could gather. One day, as Park was teaching a group of Umbra how to maintain the water filtration system, the cave communication system crackled to life. "Colony Hope, this is Confederation vessel Sunseeker," came a voice. "Are there any survivors? Please respond." The humans gathered around the radio. 4 months had passed since the evacuation. The Confederation was finally returning to check on them. "This is Governor Yoon Bin," Yoon responded. "We are alive. All 70 humans and the Umbra population." There was a long silence from the radio. "Governor Yoon," Ambassador Takel's voice finally replied. "The Confederation is surprised by this news. We are preparing to land and assess your situation." Yoon looked around at her fellow humans and their Umbra friends. What had begun as a desperate attempt to survive had become something more, a new way of living. A cooperation between species that the Confederation had never imagined possible. "We'll be here, Ambassador," she said with a small smile. In the mud, Bakji moved her light slowly across the cave wall, examining the strange markings. As the colony's archaeologist, she had been studying the Umbra's cave art for months. But these markings were different. They were not made by the Umbra. "Dr. Han, you need to see this," she called to Han Su, who had arrived with the Confederation inspection team. The elderly geologist who had made first contact with the aliens on Mars had insisted on coming to see the colony for himself. Han walked carefully through the narrow tunnel, his old bones aching in the planet's strong gravity. "What did you find?" he asked, his voice echoing in the stone chamber. Bake pointed her light at the wall. "Look at these symbols. They're not Umbra work. The cuts are too precise, too deep, and they match something I've seen before." Han leaned closer, adjusting his glasses. His eyes widened. "These are similar to the markings we found on Mars," he whispered. "The ones that led to first contact." Bake nodded. "I thought so too. But how is that possible? The Confederation never mentioned visiting this planet before we arrived." Han ran his fingers over the ancient marks. Perhaps it wasn't the Confederation. They spent the next week exploring deeper into the unmapped sections of the cave system. The Umbra helped, showing them hidden passages that even they rarely visited. With each new chamber, they found more evidence, strange metal objects embedded in the walls, symbols carved into the stone, and finally, a sealed door. It took 3 days for Park Tai and his engineers to open it. Inside was a small room filled with objects that looked like technology, but unlike anything humans or the Confederation had created. "These artifacts must be at least 10,000 years old," Bak said as she carefully examined a device that glowed faintly when touched. "But the technology looks more advanced than what the Confederation uses now." Ambassador Takel, who had reluctantly joined the exploration after hearing about the discovery, stood silently in the doorway. His normally expressionless alien face seemed troubled. You recognize this technology, don't you? Han asked him directly. Tekel hesitated before answering. There are stories in Confederation history, tales of a species that came before us. We call them the predecessors. Most consider them myths. Not myths, Han said, holding up a small object that projected a holographic image when activated. The image showed a star map with several worlds marked. They were real, and they were here. The hologram included both Mars and Proxima Centauri, but what shocked everyone most was the image of the beings shown in the corner of the projection. They were short, stocky creatures with wide feet and hands that looked made for digging. They look almost like, Blake began. Mud dwellers, Han finished for her. A species evolved for wet, heavy gravity environments. Ambassador Tekel seemed deeply uncomfortable. This cannot be correct. The Confederation's oldest species are desert and vacuum evolved. They are the most advanced. Perhaps that's what you were meant to believe, Han suggested. But this evidence suggests otherwise. The predecessors were a mud species, like us, and they were far more advanced than the current Confederation. As they continued to study the artifacts, Kang Du made another breakthrough. Using the translation system he had developed for the Umbra, he began to decode the symbols on the walls. It's a warning, he told the others. The predecessors were studying the star, Proxima Centauri. They discovered it was unstable, prone to massive solar storms. Like the one that drove us underground, Yoon said. Kang nodded. They built these deep chambers as shelters. But there's more. He pointed to another section of text. They mention other worlds where they left their knowledge. Worlds that matched their biology. Mud worlds, Han said quietly. Earth must have been one of them. The implications were enormous. If humans shared a connection with these ancient predecessors, it might explain why certain human innovations developed differently from Confederation technology. They guided our evolution, Bake whispered. Not directly, but by leaving knowledge for us to find when we were ready. Ambassador Tekel had heard enough. He left the chamber without speaking, his forearms stiff with what seemed like anger or fear. Han watched him go, then turned back to the ancient technology left by beings who had walked in mud long before humans existed. The Confederation has been wrong all along, he said to the others. Mud isn't primitive. It's where life began, where civilization began, and perhaps where it reaches its highest forms. Yoon looked thoughtful. Should we tell Earth about this? Han smiled slightly. Oh yes, I think the Confederation's hierarchy is about to get very muddy indeed. Kim Jae stood tall as the Confederation Council chamber fell silent. 1 month had passed since the discovery of the predecessor artifacts on Proxima Centauri. Now, as Earth's diplomat, he faced the 17 species of the Galactic Confederation to argue for humanity's new status. The Council Chamber was designed to accommodate all Confederation species. Some members floated in special anti-gravity pods. Others sat on high perches. The desert species, like Ambassador Tekel, stood on raised platforms. Kim stood on the lowest level, the place reserved for mud species. The evidence is clear, Kim said, his voice firm. The predecessors were a mud species who achieved technology beyond what the Confederation currently possesses. They visited multiple worlds, including Earth, leaving knowledge for future generations to find. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. The head of the council, a tall, thin being from a vacuum species, leaned forward. This challenges much of our understanding, the council head said. For centuries, we believed desert and vacuum species evolved the most advanced civilizations. Perhaps it was simply the story that suited those in power, Kim suggested carefully. Ambassador Tekel stepped forward. Even if we accept this new information, what does humanity want from us? Kim looked directly at him. Recognition, not as a probationary species, but as equals. And we want the Confederation to reconsider how it views all so-called primitive species. He activated a hologram showing the human Umbra colony. After the solar storm passed, They had begun building parts of the colony on the surface again, but they maintained their underground home too, working with the Umbra to create a shared civilization. What you see here is something new to the Confederation, Kim continued. Two species from different evolutionary paths, living and working together. Not with one dominating the other, but as partners. The council members watched as the hologram showed Umbra children learning to use human tools, while human children learned the Umbra way of finding food in the cave systems. The Umbra were considered primitive, Kim said, but in 6 months of cooperation, they have learned skills that the Confederation expected would take centuries. And we have learned from them too. Their understanding of cave ecosystems has helped us develop new biological technologies. A council member from one of the ice species spoke up. This cooperation is unexpected. Our studies suggested such arrangements would fail. Your studies were based on old assumptions, Kim replied. Humans have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. When different species must work together to survive, they find ways to overcome their differences. The council debated for hours. Some members argued that the old hierarchy should remain. Others were curious about the human-Umbra cooperation. Through it all, Kim stood patiently on his mud species platform, remembering how far humanity had come since their first meeting with Tekel. Finally, the council reached a decision. Earth will be recognized as a full member of the Confederation, the council had announced, not as a probationary species. Furthermore, we will establish a new division within the Confederation, focused on interspecies cooperation and extreme environment adaptation. Humanity will lead this division. A murmur ran through the chamber. Never before had a new species been given such responsibility so quickly. And the Umbra? Kim asked. They will be classified as a protected developing species, the council head said, under joint human confederation guardianship. This too is unprecedented. As the council session ended, Ambassador Tekel approached Kim. Your species continues to surprise us, Tekel said. When we first met, I thought humans were simple mud dwellers who would struggle to find a place among the stars. Kim smiled slightly. And now I wonder what other assumptions we have been wrong about, Tekel admitted. Perhaps there is much to learn from those who evolved in difficult environments, those who had to adapt constantly to survive. Kim looked around at the Grand Council chamber with its separate sections for each type of species. The predecessors learned to adapt beyond their original environments, he said, and it seems they became greater because of it, not despite it. Tekel was quiet for a moment. Yes. Perhaps the future of the Confederation lies not in keeping species separate, but in finding ways to bring them together. As Kim prepared to return to Proxima Centauri with the news, he thought about how far they had come. From being called mud people as an insult to having that same term become a mark of respect and interest. Sometimes the strongest foundations were built from the humblest materials, even mud. Dr. Han Su walked slowly through the streets of New Hope, the human Umbra city that had grown over the past 5 years. At 83 years old, his body felt the pull of Proxima Centauri's heavy gravity more than most, but he had insisted on making this journey. Are you tired, Doctor? Asked Flicker, the Umbra leader who walked beside him. Through Kang Du's translation device, which had become much more sophisticated, the Umbra's clicks and whistles were converted to human speech. A little, Han admitted, but I wouldn't miss today for anything. They continued toward the large building at the center of the city. Half of it stood above ground, built in the human style with transparent windows that let in the planet's reddish light. The other half extended underground, following Umbra building patterns with glowing fungi lighting the tunnels. This was the Interspecies University, the first of its kind in the Confederation. Today was its first graduation ceremony. Inside the main hall, hundreds of humans and Umbra gathered together. They no longer needed environmental adjustments to share space. Humans had adapted to the caves, and the Umbra had grown used to the surface world's light and open spaces. Han took his seat of honor at the front. From here, He could see the stage where the graduates would soon receive their certifications. Behind them stood a statue, not of a human or an Umbra, but of a predecessor, created based on the ancient holograms they had discovered. Its short, sturdy form reminded everyone of their shared connection to the past. Governor Yum Bin, now in her second term, stepped onto the stage. 5 years ago, she began, we huddled underground during a deadly storm, uncertain if we would survive. Today, we celebrate not just survival, but growth and discovery. The crowd applauded as 20 Umbra students entered, followed by 20 human students. They had studied together, learning each other's languages, cultures, and technologies. These graduates, Yum continued, are the first class of the Interspecies University. They represent our future, a future where different species work together, learn from each other, and build something greater than either could alone. Han watched proudly as each student received their certification. He remembered the first time humans had encountered the Umbra, how strange and alien they had seemed. Now, human children played with Umbra children in the city parks. Families shared meals together, despite their different foods and eating habits. After the ceremony, Han stood on a balcony overlooking the city. Kim Jae, Earth's diplomat to the Confederation, joined him. Quite a view, Kim said, gesturing to the mix of surface buildings and cave entrances that made up New Hope. Yes, Han agreed. Not what we expected when we first landed here. The Confederation is changing because of this place, Kim told him. 3 other mud species have joined in the last 2 years. They're all sending representatives here to learn from us. Han nodded. I heard they arrived today. As if on cue, a Confederation ship appeared in the sky above them. It landed gently at the spaceport on the edge of the city. From the ship emerged 3 groups of beings, each from a different world. Each evolved in wet, heavy conditions. They looked nothing like humans or Umbra, but they shared a common heritage as mud species. They come seeking Earth's guidance, Kim explained. After centuries of being told they were primitive, they want to learn how we changed the Confederation's thinking. Han watched as the city welcomed these new visitors. Humans and Umbra approached them without fear or prejudice, ready to share what they had learned. The term mud species is used with pride now, Kim said. In Confederation meetings, species actually claim mud heritage to support their arguments. Han laughed softly. What a change from when we were first called mud people as an insult. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across New Hope, Han thought about the journey that had brought them here. From discovering alien markings on Mars to building a new kind of civilization on a distant world. You know what I've learned after all these years in space, Han said to Kim. What's that? That home isn't about the ground beneath your feet. It's about what you build on that ground, what you create together. Kim nodded. Even if that ground is mud. Especially then, Han replied with a smile. Mud is where life begins, where things grow and change, where different elements come together to create something new. Below them, the city lights began to glow as darkness fell. Above ground and below, humans and Umbra, and now new species moved together in harmony. Different paths, different origins, but a shared future. They were truly at home in the mud, and the mud had become the foundation for a new understanding of civilization itself.